Hi everyone, this is Al McKay. Welcome to episode 122. I'm speaking with Brandon Jarratt from Disney, a technical director, also an Academy Award winner. This is going to be a lot of fun. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
Okay, so welcome to a brand new episode. This is going to be a fun one. I'm speaking with Brandon Jarratt. We talked about a lot of really cool stuff, both about how he carved out his career path all the way to Disney and managed to fast track a lot of it quite aggressively, but also once he got into Disney, avoiding being pigeonholed into certain areas, especially having a lot of success in City Engine and all the other tools that they were using for production, and still managing to get a lot of growth within those areas and outside of it as well. We got into a lot of really cool stuff. I really enjoyed this episode. Couple of things I'm going to get into before we get going. One of the key things is that, as I've mentioned before, I have some free training out at the moment, 10 hours spanned over 7 videos of live action visual effects training. It's actually only available for the next couple of days and then it's closing down. So if you haven't checked it out yet, go to alanmckay.com/decay, so D-E-C-A-Y. You'll be able to check it out there. Otherwise, if you're listening to this past the 12th of January, 2018, it's the first time I've actually mentioned 2018 this year, then still check out the link. You'll be able to sign up and get notified of other really cool training and a lot of other great stuff as well. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on at the moment. I just started another 90-day year, so I'm excited about that, just carving out all of 2018 into 4 different quarters and all the things that myself, my team have in store. So one of the cool things is we have a lot of really cool guides coming out. One of them I know is one that even this week I've gotten maybe 15, 20 emails specifically asking about computer hardware. So what we've been doing is working really hard on putting together a small guide, which is a visual effects hardware guide on understanding a lot of the ins and outs of buying new systems and where to focus on specifically in your area, whether it might be motion graphics or game development, if you're effects and simulation, or if you're a character environment artist or lighter, things like that. So it definitely covers a lot, and it's still early days, but the goal is to update this every 3 to 6 months. I've got to double check when the update periods are, but basically we're going to keep this up to date quite regularly, and this will be something that you'll be able to download from my website, my new website, when it goes live in a couple of weeks. I've just been anxiously waiting for the launch to end, because we're actually in the middle of launching the live action series registration for the year. So if you haven't signed up, you've still got a couple of days, but January 12th is when the doors close for another year, and then 2019 will be the next time that we open back up. So all of this is in the show notes if you want to go to alanmckay.com/122 for episode 122. I can't believe we're up to that already. And I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about a lot of stuff we're doing. So there's a hardware guide coming out. The Productive Artist book is out as well. You can check that out. All of this is free. And we're working on a bunch of new stuff at the moment. I hope that you enjoyed the boot camp that we ran in December, and that was the best year yet. I've been working really hard on that, getting all the videos, the tutorials, all the recordings, the guide, everything else out for that. And it's definitely been a lot of fun. My website's been absolutely hammered over December. I think there was 25,000, 30,000 people just in the past 2 weeks have been downloading all the stuff, and it's just been really cool to kind of see everyone taking action, especially over the holidays, when I imagine most people are too busy partying and having fun and just enjoying being away from the computer. So that's really, really cool. Now, I do plan to do a couple more boot camps. They're going to be probably starting back up in February. And there's a lot of work that goes into these. And unfortunately, between the launch, the productive artist, the boot camp, the videos and all the stuff that went with that, and also all the free training that I put out, everything over the Christmas break, and of course it being Christmas, and getting sick for 2.5 weeks, it just completely put me behind on everything. So I'm trying to get caught up furiously at the moment, because I know in February and March I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling. So this will be, I've got the It's Art Masterclass in Paris in March, and we'll be doing a meetup with all my students, everyone in the mentorship and the live action series. We'll be doing a European meetup there. And I'm also going to be in San Diego in February for 2 weeks. So I'm scrambling to get as much done as I can in between that time. But I'm hoping to get another bootcamp going, and I'm hoping we'll make that a regular thing. So every month we will be theming a month and going through a lot of really great, valuable content. As I get into it, it is so much work that, I don't want to be held to that just in case I can't keep it to every single month, but we're going to definitely try. It is a lot of work, and I'm so proud of everyone who was involved in getting all the stuff that we did get done for December, because it was definitely a pretty frantic month, that's for sure. So yeah, lots of stuff coming up. It's going to be really cool. I want to get into this episode because I think there's going to be a lot of really great information that you will be able to get a lot from. And I also want to say thank you for everyone who's been sending me emails and messages, every other form of communication over the past month with all the free training and everything been putting out. I've been fiercely trying to reply to everyone's emails. I've done pretty good considering, because there's been thousands, but I don't think I've replied to everyone. I'm doing my best. But yeah, again, I just want to say thank you for everyone. If I haven't replied to your email yet, I will do my best. I'm trying to make weekends my email days to get caught up. But yeah, again, thank you for everyone. It's been really cool. It's been really inspiring to seeing all the amazing work that everyone's been doing. And I love when I do put together these really big, mega free courses, because it's a chance for everyone to collaborate and do really cool stuff, show off your work. It's just awesome. I love it. So I'm going to leave it there if you want to check out the show notes. As I mentioned, episode 122, so alanmckay.com/122. And you better get information on the free training, the productive artist, all the other good stuff. So plenty of information there, as well as great quotes and other insights from this episode. Okay, so without further ado, here's Brandon Jarratt. Let's dive in.
Howdy, my name's Brandon Jarratt. I am a General Technical Director at Walt Disney Animation Studios in Burbank, California.
Awesome, man. And yeah, I mean, thanks again for taking the time to do this. I figured just to kind of get started, I'd love to kind of chat a little bit about how you got started, because as I mentioned before, I think that everyone has their own path, and some people kind of accidentally fell into it along the way. Other people are just like had their head set on it. So for you, I mean, did you always want to work in film, or is it kind of more something you discovered later on?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely fall in the latter category. I mean, ever since, so I saw Toy Story in the theater, when I was a kid, and that was kind of the moment when I knew I wanted to work not just in animation, but like doing CG animation in particular, because I was always interested in computers. I built a lot of my own PCs and stuff as a kid and on into college. And so I enjoyed that part of things, the technical kind of computer side, but I saw like, whoa, they made a movie, an animated movie with computers. How do I get into that? That was really where it started for me. I mean, I was vaguely aware of other CG effects things and stuff like that before, but I mean, Toy Story was really kind of the first big flag for me. It's like, yes, this is what I want to do.
That's cool. That's really cool. And for you, was it kind of a clear path of like, all right, I got to go and research this, or figure out like how the hell do they do that? What software do I use? Do I just grab Photoshop and start rocking out, or?
Yeah. I think actually the first CG package, because yeah, it was definitely like, okay, how do I get into this? How do I learn more about this? And I think this was when I was still in middle school. I got a copy of Bryce.
Oh man.
Yeah, I think it was like Bryce 4 maybe was the first 3D.
You're one of the people responsible for plaguing the internet with landscape pics for it's like Poser and Bryce were like the two ones.
Yeah. Oh no, don't worry. I got a copy of Poser too. I think it was maybe on the back of CG World or something.
Nice.
and I played around with those, messed around with those, just to kind of see, learning, really basic things like what keyframe animation was in CG, and, kind of basic material properties, stuff like that. But that was more just kind of so I could understand some of the software that was out there. I, from a career perspective, was thinking, okay, like, this is what I want to do. Are there programs or places that have a focus in that area? And more importantly, is there a way that I can actually get my foot in the door in the animation industry? Because, it's obviously really competitive and really hard to break into. And so I was trying to think about that along the way as well. So I kind of settled on the strategy of, okay, I'm going to try to do this two-pronged approach where I have this focus on computers and this interest in computers. So I'll take classes. In high school, I took like a computer repair class and a web kind of web page design class. We were using Dreamweaver and stuff just to kind of keep my technical chops up at that time. And then also thinking about art, because I liked drawing a lot. I liked making movies a lot. I'm sure there are embarrassing YouTube videos people could drag up that I made in high school and previous. But I was really into filmmaking and art as well as computers. So I tried to get a little bit of both, even as early as high school. And so I'm from Texas, and I grew up mostly there in Central Texas. So there weren't a ton of the place where I'm from. There weren't a ton of options for me in terms of, like, there's no studios nearby. There's no big VFX houses or anything like that.
More video games and I think real effects if you're in Dallas or around there, pretty much.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So there weren't a whole lot of, like, professional resources for me to try to reach out to, at least not locally, and not at that time for sure. So I had to think about it more in terms of, what can I focus on immediately in my environment with my education to try to grow my skills. But fortunately, there was one class in high school that I took that was we actually did some CG animation and stuff. So we had Cinema 4D, I think, was the package that we had there on the swiveling screen IMAX on the little base. And I think that was the first OS 10 Mac that I got to use. So that was a lot of fun. We did some Adobe Flash animation, and we did some Cinema 4D stuff. And I actually got to go to, like, a little statewide competition, and we had a few hours to make, like, a really quick CG short. So just like this really high pressure kind of intense thing.
A few hours, wow.
Yeah, and just to tell you something about the quality of what we turned out, the winning piece was, I hope nobody ever finds videos of these things because they're super embarrassing now, but it was fun to just kind of do that in a competitive environment. And I can't remember the name of it, but I know that Mrs. Weatherly was my teacher for that class, and I'm grateful to her for that because, that was a good opportunity to kind of get things started as far as my knowledge of CG packages outside of whatever I could manage to teach myself.
That's so cool. And I like the fact that you were able to kind of get that inspiration and say, like, yeah, this is what I want to do, and start kind of branching out and figuring out, okay, well, what are the tools and resources around me right now that I can use to kind of leverage up? And, because I think for a lot of people, it's kind of like, all right, I'm just going to dabble a little bit and then, see how things go, but there's not like that kind of direction that you've got. So for you, I mean, when it came to graduating school, I mean, what was the next step for you?
So I finished high school in 2006, and I applied to a few different universities, but I decided to go to Texas A&M in College Station, Texas, partly because both my parents went there and my granddad went there. And, I have a bunch of family who are Aggies and that went to Texas A&M. It was a state school, so it was a lot cheaper than some of the other places that I applied that were out of state. And they also had Texas A&M has a master's program. At the time, it was only a master's program. It's called the Viz Lab, or the Master of Science in Visualization. And that program has a pretty long history in the industry. They've sent a lot of graduates to different animation and VFX studios. Tim McLaughlin, the department head there, used to be at ILM and like worked on Jar Jar Binks and all this kind of stuff. So it's a decently well-connected program in the industry. And so that was the other advantage for me thinking about Texas A&M was like, hey, I can go and study here and then maybe get into this grad program and then hopefully from there get into the industry. So it was kind of the convenience of the location and the fact that it was a cheaper in-state tuition cost for me was combined with the appeal of that grad program really sealed the deal for me. So then I had the choice of between typically getting into the Viz Lab program, at least the way it was at the time when I started. It's much more formalized now. It's an actual department. They have an undergrad program. There's all this kind of new stuff that was not quite there when I started in 2006. But I could either do what's considered, I guess, the more artistic route, which is through the College of Architecture and the environmental design program. That was sort of the only way in, because at the time, Texas A&M was not an art school in any way, shape, or form. And the Viz Lab was kind of the closest thing that they had. And this environmental design degree was sort of like the graphic design and more artistic leaning students. Like that's the kind of stuff that they would do.
Right.
So I could either do that and then, hopefully finish school and end up with an environmental design degree, and who knows what job I would be able to get with that. Or I could go study computer science instead, because that was sort of the more technical route into the Viz Lab. And then when I graduated, if I didn't get into grad school, I still had a computer science degree.
That's
I
right.
would probably be able to get a job and, do work that I enjoyed. Maybe not my dream job right away, but, I could work towards that with a computer science degree.
I think that's like one kind of big advantage there is the fact that, because it's kind of funny, I got a lot of emails the past couple of days and about that specific subject about, hey, my parents want me to go off and do medicine or this and this and this. And in a lot of ways, I mean, if you have people kind of pressuring you, and not that you were, but like if you actually have people pressuring you to go get a quote unquote real job, it's kind of tricky because visual effects, let's say, is not typically a traditional route. And the cool thing is that there is the kind of intermediate step where, let's say, computer science, where you still have that you can leverage later on, where you could study that. And for places like ILM, a lot of other bigger studios that really implore people having that technical background, it means that you can come in with that advantage. But at the same time, if for whatever reason later you wanted to exit out into the real world, you would actually have like that background to kind of fall back on, opposed to, hey, I studied 3D animation, how do I apply that to being a lawyer or whatever other type of thing. So,
yeah. I feel like it's easier to go one way than the other, right? Like you said at the end there, it's just, I know all about animating characters, and now what can I do with that in manufacturing or whatever.
Exactly.
So
not that you can be a lawyer with a computer science degree, but yeah.
Sure. Why not?
But I mean, at that point, like, again, just kind of looking at you being interested in 3D, did you have a good enough understanding at that point of the industry that there were specific roles? And obviously there are technical director roles and other roles that where you can leverage more of a technical background as well as a creative background?
Yeah, I think when I started my undergraduate, when I was working on my bachelor's degree, I didn't quite have that depth of knowledge about the way that the different jobs worked. But as I went through my computer science degree, I started going to every time that the Viz Lab brought in somebody to visit from the industry, I put on a lecture, give a presentation or whatever. That's how I gained that knowledge. As I went to those presentations, I talked to the people who came to visit, just full of questions about like, well, how does this work? And who does what job? And, what kind of knowledge do I need to do X? So all the stuff that I learned about how that worked, kind of came over the first couple of years of college, just going to those lectures and trying to figure that out. And as I did that, I realized that the technical director role kind of fit not only with what I was interested in terms of problem solving and technical know-how, but just in terms of some of the work experience that I already had. In high school, I worked at the Acer computer company, like doing computer repair and that kind of stuff. And then a little bit of software development for them at the end, the last time I worked there. And as an undergraduate at A&M, I was a student worker. I worked at the computer help desk. So I got, my sort of customer service part of my early experience. People coming in with all kinds of different problems, different machine setups, professors who can't remember their email password, everything. So that exposed me to like a broad range, not only of problems and different ways to solve them, but just the way that different people, the temperament that different people have, when they're frustrated by something. Mm-hmm. Some people are really nice and understand that you're trying to help them, and some people are not nice and they require immediate attention and they need the fire put out right away. And so I was lucky to have that as a good experience as a college student, because I think it taught me a lot of patience, and I think maybe introduced me to good bedside manner when dealing with artists, which is something that's really important in my day-to-day job. So
that's great.
On top, that was, I guess those two things really were big helps to me in terms of the soft skills side of what I do, not that's just right. the technical know-how, but how do you relate to people? How do you help them and work with them to solve a problem without making them feel like they're dumb?
Yeah, and I think it's such a critical thing too, because I always look at it like, at the end of the day, being able to do your job is great, but if you can't work well with the team, and it's either if it's all about you, or you're just kind of allergic or poisonous to other people in terms of your attitude, then it really has that's way more important, and it's going to have much more of an effect on the longevity of you inside the team. So you're right, like having hard skills, soft skills, like I think soft skills are really critical in that regard.
Yeah, totally.
And jumping forward a bit, like from that point, did you go directly into Disney, or like what was your path to breaking in there?
So I finished my computer science degree. I applied to the Viz Lab. When I was in college, just like I mentioned before with high school, I was doing my computer science degree, but also had these supporting area classes. There's kind of a chunk in my degree plan that let me take 3 or 4 classes that were considered to be a supporting area. I'm using air quotes when I say that. And those could sort of be whatever you wanted, as long as you made a good enough case to your academic advisor. And so basically for those classes, I took darkroom photography, figure drawing, film history, and I think a second life drawing class, because I wanted, not only to generate some portfolio material for my grad school application, but also, just to keep at those kinds of artistic endeavors and get some practice doing that stuff and exercise that side of my brain at the same time that I was doing the more technical degree. So doing those other courses, which were also in the Viz department for the most part, which enabled me to meet Viz professors and get connected with the department and with even like the office staff, because I would have to get forced into those classes sometimes, because they were a little bit hard for CS majors to enroll in without a little extra push. Just taking those classes really helped round out my education with the extra sort of artistic focus. And then when it came time to actually apply for grad school, like I said, I had some portfolio material I could use. They were already familiar with my name from me like badgering them all the time about these classes that I wanted to take. And I had a pretty good idea of what they were looking for in terms of the application. So I fortunately got accepted into the Viz Lab as a grad student and started right after I graduated with my bachelor's. So then, it was on into the brave new world of graduate school and kind of that lab environment and the way things worked there. And that was really where my more specific kind of CG education came in. I mean, in my undergrad, I took a computer graphics class. I wrote a ray tracer. I did all the kind of classical computer graphics stuff. Did a video game development class. Wrote, we wrote our own physics engine for our game, and foolishly decided to make a 3D game in like the semester that we had, that kind of stuff. So going into grad school, I had a little bit of all of those things. And the Viz Lab is a really great program in that, it's historically, I guess, been focused on the animation and visual effects industries and preparing people for that kind of work. But it also allows you to pursue the things that you're interested in terms of visualization. I mean, that's why it's called that. It's any kind of visualization, whether you're looking at seismic data from, collected from boats off the coast of Alaska, or you're looking at, actual CG animation or things like that. You can pursue those things in that environment in the lab, which I thought was really cool. And in keeping with that, I guess the first semester of grad school, I took a generative art class, which was really interesting. My professor, Phil Gallanter, kind of joked at the beginning of the class, your projects could really be anything. Like they could be a painting, they could be a computer program, they could be a dance. It was as long as they follow these kinds of rules that you set up for like L systems and all these generative art procedures. And so I kind of took him on his word, and my final project for that class was a dance, actually. My girlfriend at the time, and now my wife, is a dancer in a professional company there in College Station, and so I collaborated with her and her dance company to choreograph this dance that was based on a little algorithm that I'd come up with, and that was still one of the coolest things I think I've ever gotten to work on, just because of the unique blend of disciplines. But so that's sort of an example of the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. Like you can do your CG animated short, and you can also do all these other things in the Viz Lab. That was one of the things I really enjoyed about it.
Cool. And so, like, what was the final output for that? Was it a actual animation?
We made a video for it. I filmed it in the studio, but we also did a live performance of the dance. So at the end of every year, we have this thing called Visagogo, which is kind of the graduate student showcase of all the work that they've done over the year. So we actually had Brazos Dance Collective come and perform that dance live on stage for everybody before they started showing all of the CG work. So that was it was documented as a video, but we were also able to perform it live. And the neat thing about it is, no two performances are the same because of, they're just following the rules, and these emergent behaviors happen in the choreography as dancers come into contact with each other. And, it was just super fun to be able to have, a sort of unusual project for what you might think of as a CG school.
Yeah, no, that's great. I love that. And it's definitely different to, I guess, I'm sure what a lot of other people there were all putting together. So that's cool. And I guess from there, like, after you graduated, jumping ahead a little bit, what was the next step for you?
So I can't even quite get to graduation yet, because my first step was while I was still a grad student there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the Viz Lab has a summer program called the Summer Industry Course. And every year they hook up with a different animation studio and have people from that studio come to Texas A&M and help the students make a 30-second animated short. And in the summer of 2011, this was going into my second year of grad school, I was lucky enough that Walt Disney Animation Studios was the partner that year with the Summer Industry Course. So we were broken into small teams of 5 or 6 students. And there was, each one of us was kind of assigned a different role. And I was the TD for my team. So I was tasked with help setting up the pipeline for our project and doing the more sort of technical setup stuff. So that first week was all about setting up the pipeline and getting the project together, was sort of laying the groundwork for all of our data and how we were going to manage everything. And that is where I got to meet Hank Driscoll, who's one of the technical supervisors here at Disney Animation, and my boss on several films that I've gotten to work on. So I first got to meet him because he came out and spent a week with us helping us build the pipeline for the project, and just got to know him on a more personal level, and stay at the lab late some nights, just kind of trying to get through all the pipeline setup that we needed for the project. Mm-hmm. As well as in the subsequent weeks, we had more people from different disciplines come and talk about whatever it was we were meant to be working on that week in that stage of the short, like talking about look development or animation or effects. I got to meet Dale Maeda, who's one of our heads of effects here at the studio. And he helped me I actually got to do some of the effects work in Houdini on that project too. And that was my first time using Houdini. So the summer industry course was really my sort of foot in the door for at least meeting some of these people. And it allowed me to continue to connect with them after that summer was over. One of the things that I think I learned from that experience was, Hank told me feel free to send me an email, ask me questions, let's stay in touch. And I took him seriously with that, and, try every couple of months, just try to follow up and send him an email and say, hey, how's it going over there? These are the kinds of things I'm working on. Let me know if there are any, when your next trainee program opens up, that kind of thing. So that's one of the things I've found a little bit odd since I started working at Disney, is how often I will tell people to send me an email or ask me questions and they don't do it. Yep. It's kind of shocking, actually, because I think I'm a fairly approachable person. I don't feel like I'm big and scary and intimidating, but I guess people still, and I remember that feeling, right? Like you feel like maybe you're bothering somebody or you're not worth their time or whatever. But I promise, these are nice, reasonable people. And if you send them an email that is just honestly asking them some questions and trying to get a sense of what you want to do, I don't think most people are not going to respond to you in a negative way if you do that.
Absolutely. I think it's more an internal thing rather than being afraid of what they're going to think. It's either, some people are lazy and don't act on it. Other people, you're right, there's going to be a small amount that are afraid of rejection or 100 other things. But you're right. I think the number one thing is if you have an opportunity to connect, there's nothing more important, I think, than being able to network. And I think that's really smart of you to be able to take advantage of those opportunities and be able to say, hey, keep the relationship alive. Obviously, again, most people, I think, don't go overboard and badger the hell out of people. But I think doing the 3-month or 6-month, just ping people just to say, hey, what's up? Keeping that kind of rotation going, it's critical to kind of keep those relationships alive and until they flourish into hopefully employment or something down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, an email every 3 months from somebody is not going to annoy me. If you email me every day for a week after I talk to you, then maybe, that's another story. But, so yeah, I got connected with Disney through the summer industry course. And then I, went on and finished the rest of my, thesis work and my grad school stuff. And so the next summer in 2012, I applied for, and got the TD Intern position at Disney Animation. So I actually got to come out here for the first time, which was just amazing. It was, I got the email that I had gotten the internship, and I think in no small part to the week that I had spent with Hank and, kind of showing off the kind of work that I could do and my problem solving ability and, trying to take as much advantage of that, amazing opportunity of actually working side by side with people from Disney and, not squandering that, I think the biggest thing for getting me that internship.
Absolutely. And was Burbank everything you hoped it would be?
Yeah, well, it was funny. I drove from Texas for the internship rather than fly, because I knew that LA was all about driving everywhere. So I wanted to make sure that I had a car so I could go the places I wanted to go and see the things I wanted to see.
You would have felt really cheated out of it if you didn't get to enjoy some LA traffic.
Yes, that's true. Actually, I came in on a Friday. So I come in 10 West coming into Los Angeles on a Friday at like 5 o'clock.
Going to the valley.
Yes, exactly. So it's like 100 degrees and we're parked on the freeway. I've been driving literally all day from Las Cruces, New Mexico. And so it was not my most pleasant introduction to the city. But, it was fine. It was really worth it, because the next day I got to get up and drive by the studio and see the big blue hat and, realize like, hey, I'm actually going to get to be in there and do some work. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it was a rough drive, but it was worth it.
That's cool. No, I love that. And you're right. Like I can still remember one of the first studios I ever worked at, like flying to Sydney in Australia and going there a day early. So it was like a Sunday, and like taking a bus all the way over to the building just so I could like look at the door and be like, oh my God, tomorrow I'm going to start there. So yeah, it's kind of funny. You take this stuff for granted now, but like at the time it's one of those, it's kind of one of those bookmarks in your journey, being able to say like, yeah, this is a pivotal time that's going to change my career, life, and all that kind of stuff in between. So that's cool. And what was it like on your first day?
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was pinching myself all day. It was pretty wild. We have the studio's just been through a renovation pretty recently, and it looks different than it did when I was here as an intern in 2012. And that was when that summer they were finishing up on the first Wreck-It Ralph. So that was kind of where I got to see, how a CG feature film was actually made, right? Like I'm looking at Ralph's rig. I see these things in play blasts and, it's stuff inside of Maya sessions and things that aren't these big, pretty full renders. That's the only thing that I get to see. But I'm getting to see the stuff that's behind the scenes, which is just incredible. So I got to meet the other interns. And at that time, the intern program, or that particular group, we were making a short, which I think is a great way to structure it, because, everybody kind of gets to do their discipline, but you're all working together for a common goal, which is, really all about what we do here. Everybody kind of pulling their weight and doing their part for the good end product. And the unusual thing for us, though, was that this short was 2D and CG. So we had some 2D animators, we had a CG animator. I got to learn my very first, anything that I knew about 2D animation. I learned, I opened Harmony for the first time, which was really cool. Got to come up with sort of a management pipeline for 2D assets as well as our CG stuff. But yeah, it was really cool coming in the first day and meeting these people from different schools and different countries, just kind of getting a sense of the diversity of this place and all of the amazing skills that everyone has. I mean, I was looking at the reels for the other interns and seeing their incredible work and wondering like, wow, how did I manage to get here when they brought these other folks in? I was also the only grad student. Everyone else was an undergrad in that intern summer. So I was also felt like the old man of the group that year. But no, it was amazing. And I hauled my bicycle with me too from Texas. So I rode my bike from the apartments where we were staying down to the studio. And, that was just, that was really fun too, to ride in and get to sort of see things on Riverside Drive and, take it a little bit, enjoy some of the SoCal weather for the first time too. So
that's right.
Yeah, it was really amazing the first day coming in.
That's cool. And yeah, like going from there, I mean, I'd love to dive into all the projects, but like for you after the internship, like how long did that go for, and what was the next step from there to, I guess, landing the gig, the full time, going full time there?
Yeah, sure. The internship was 8 weeks. So I was here with the other interns working on the short for 8 weeks. And in between that, I was also doing my own kind of TD assignment. I was supposed to, I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but it was implementing some new feature that they wanted, that someone in my mentor in the TD department had sort of come up with this task for me to do. And, I had very little time in between to work on it because I was always putting out fires for the other interns and helping, get stuff done on the short. But over the 8 weeks, once that was over, I went back to school. I finished things up and defended my thesis. So yeah, this is 2012. So I finished the internship. I finished my thesis research, defended my thesis, got married, and then got a job offer from Disney for their trainee program, their TD trainee program, all within the space of about 4 months.
So a bit of a life shift.
Yeah, it was. It was a very, very busy fall of 2012. But so as soon as I saw that Disney was, opening up the trainee program for the following spring, I applied right away. I made sure to get my stuff in there. But I also knew that, it wasn't a sure thing. Even though I'd been to the studio and worked there, I thought I'd done a good job, but, it's a really competitive world out there, and there are a lot of really talented people who are also looking for the same thing. So I also applied at DreamWorks Animation for one of their TD sort of assistant TD, like trainee type roles. They're sort of entry level TD position. And I had a few interviews with them. They're sort of multi-step, multi-phase interview over Skype. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I actually did not have an interview with Disney, I guess because they took my 8 weeks here as an intern as my interview. So I just kind of was emailing back and forth with them. But the nice thing was I was fortunate also to get a job offer from DreamWorks. So I have this offer from Disney in one hand and this offer from DreamWorks in the other. And I had just gotten married. So my wife was like, hey, you should, try to take advantage of this and see who can give you what. And I mean, even with an entry level position, if you have a good opportunity, it's okay to ask for more when you have a little bit of leverage. Like sure. That was the thing that, so Disney offered me their trainee job, which has there's 3 months of trainee position. And then if you make the cut, basically you become an assistant TD. And so I said, hey, look, I've already been there as an intern. And this uncertainty of whether I'll make it or not after 3 months, I'm not sure I really like that. DreamWorks is offering me, at least a year guaranteed over here. And, I don't remember what the numbers for the money were exactly, but basically I was like, hey, is there any way you can sweeten the deal for me? I just got married and we're going to have a whole new sort of set of living costs and all this kind of stuff. And then they came back and said, you know what, we'll just make you an ATD and you won't have to do the trainee program. How does that sound? So, yeah, I'm very thankful to my wife for, sort of nudging me to ask for more because, it's, even though, yes, it's Disney, yes, it's DreamWorks, these are still, it's still okay to ask for what you want. It doesn't mean that they're going to shoot you down immediately necessarily. The worst they can say is no. And you will take what we offer or you won't take the job. I was just fortunate to be able to have both of those offers in hand and kind of get myself a better deal, even just coming into the studio. So
no, that's great. I mean, if anything, you're giving yourself more opportunities, and you're right. At the end of the day, it's a business, and we all have to make a living. LA is expensive, so because of that, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, look, I have these multiple opportunities. I'm trying to make the right decision. Obviously, it isn't, like going to smaller studios where there's a fast turnaround. You're making an investment of your time and your life to move out there and to do that. So I do like the fact that it didn't need to be just financial as well, because that I think is one of the big mistakes a lot of people make, is that, hey, I want an extra 5K and then I'm yours. And you're in an opportunity where instead you can say, hey, look, I'm starting here. Here's the career path that traditionally you guys lay out. I want to make my decision consciously based on which one is going to be the better career path. And obviously the money's going to come later. If you move up to an ATD, next step's going to be a TD. Obviously there's going to be pay bumps with all that, so it's kind of in the background. That all happens anyway, so it's more about which one is going to be able to give me the better long-term career goals that are going to get me further ahead and get me closer to what I actually want to do, rather than working essentially in the mailroom of VFX. So,
yeah. I mean, I was really just focused on security at that point. And, that's a hard thing in this industry is security, because, it's obviously there's a lot of instability in animation and VFX. But at that point in time, if I could get closer to knowing that I would be there, at least through the run of one film, then I was going to feel better about that than if I only knew for sure that I would be there for 3 months. So that was kind of why I was focused on that.
Cool. No, that's awesome. And yeah, I guess at that point, you jumped onto Big Hero 6. Is that the first project that you did when you officially started?
Yes, it is. I started in January of 2013 working on Big Hero 6. And that movie is always going to be really special to me because it's the first one I got to work on.
I like the movie. These days I don't watch too many animated features, but I really dug that just because it really captured San Francisco so well. You could almost tell exactly where you were at any given point. And yeah, I don't know, it's just kind of really captured the vibe of it. And yeah, it was just a fun film. Yeah, it was great. So for you, what was it like? Again, a bit of a reality check, but I love that kind of moments where you're like, holy shit, I'm at XYZ studio. And for you being at Disney, working on, a massive feature film and getting to collaborate with all these people who have this vast amount of knowledge and have been doing a lot of this stuff for a very long time. What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, the whole first 6 months of being in ATD, you're just in sponge mode, just absorbing everything, every scrap of information, every little assignment, everything, every meeting. You're trying to absorb as much stuff as you can and just learn. Because fortunately, that's sort of how the ATD program is set up, is where you're really kind of put through the entire production pipeline as the movie goes through it. So you start early, working on assets and learning about modeling and look development. And as you move through, you go into the shot production side and talking about layout and animation and supporting those different departments. So you not only get to look at these different departmental processes when making the movie, but you also get to meet a lot of people in the studio. You get to learn what different people are like and how they work and how different teams communicate. And, it's really, it was comparing that to my intern experience. They were worlds apart, because the interns, we were sort of, we were working at Disney, yes, but we were in our own little kind of intern.
You're on the outside rather than the inside.
Yeah, we had our own little project we were working on, but now as working on a feature production was a whole other thing entirely. And I was in getting there a little bit early. I was sort of paired up with one of our associate tech soups on the film, Brett Acorn. He and I worked together a lot on. I'm glad you mentioned the city, because that was actually one of the big things that I worked on in that film, was on building the city of San Francisco. And we used S3 City Engine kind of as the backbone of generating a lot of that stuff, importing real world data. And I got to actually travel up to San Francisco. We met with a guy from Pixar up there who had set up their City Engine workflow for Cars 2 when they first used it. And so I got to go to San Francisco and take a bike tour of the city and kind of get an idea of how things were laid out and sort of the feel of the place. And, sort of alongside all the other things I was working on as an ATD, I was doing this City Engine work and the city building stuff. So that was really awesome too, to be a part of this major thing that was, that first fight sequence in the movie where Baymax and Hero kind of fly over the whole city of San Francisco. They showed us the boards for that and the story reel, and we just kind of laughed because they showed this shot where they're just flying past basically the entire length of San Francisco, like that whole peninsula, and it's all one big shot, and we just laughed because we had no idea how we were going to do that. But fortunately, we were able to figure it out and come up with something that I think looked really good.
That's cool. And what's your opinion of City Engine? Do you find it pretty intuitive?
Well, so we were working with version 2012 at the time. Yeah, there are some things about it that are nice and easy to use, and if you're using it for a certain thing, like, make total sense. But we were sort of not using it always for what it was intended for, and so some things, the development team and the guys at Esri were super supportive and really easy to get hold of, and we're always able to answer our questions. That version of it was perhaps less stable than we wanted, and I know it's a lot better now, but it sometimes took some shoehorning of the data to kind of get things in the way we wanted. And I think that was because it was like a Java Python base at that time, and we mostly do normal Python stuff for our scripting and our pipeline stuff. So not all the code we wrote kind of jived 100% with it, which made things more difficult. But in terms of the rules and actually constructing a building, like, I think that made perfect sense. And their whole CGA rule system, I think, is really neat. It allowed us to do a lot of cool stuff with the buildings, from a small library of parts, kind of coming up with this procedurally generated city on top of the real San Francisco city data.
That's cool. That's really awesome. And I guess for you, like, with that project, what do you think were your biggest contributions that you did to the project?
Well, we, let's see, the Big Hero 6 stuff was, I think we came up with a workflow that let us, Brett had the idea to sort of publish the buildings out as a particle system, which allowed us to, instance all these different building parts together in space, kind of in this assembly of buildings. And in order to create the pieces, he wrote this tool called Image Chopper, which basically let us take visual development art and chop it up into these tiles that we could then use as a starting point for creating our buildings. And I think one of the things that I did that helped us the most on that project was I wrote a script that kind of assembled a CGA rule file from these tiles. So it would read in all the pieces and look at the names and kind of pre-construct this CGA rule file for you. So you could go from a drawing and define what your tiles look like, and then you export it out with this Python script and open it up inside of City Engine, and you would see that drawing reconstructed in 3D. And before I did that, it would take probably a day, sometimes more, to sort of hand write the CGA rule file to reconstruct the building that we had. And so that allowed us to generate a whole library of buildings much more quickly because of this sort of auto CGA generation script that I wrote.
Cool. I love that. That's really cool. And I guess going from that point, like, what was the next project you went on to? And at that point, did you kind of seamlessly move up from ATD to regular TD?
Yeah, at the end of Big Hero 6, or I guess right before the end, whenever our sort of scheduled end dates were, I was fortunate to be promoted to a TD along with the other ATDs who were there with me. There were 4 of us together, and we all got promoted. We all got to move up, which was awesome. And from that point, I actually started working on Frozen Fever, which was our little sort of Frozen short that was, I think it was released in front of the live action Cinderella film from a few years back. And that was fun too, because I had not worked on the original Frozen. So it was kind of my voyage into the Frozen world. And it was also sort of a test bed for converting assets from, because Frozen was made with RenderMan, right? And during Big Hero 6, we had transitioned into Hyperion, which is our in-house GI renderer. So we needed new materials and new shaders, get everything into Hyperion land. So Frozen Fever was really our first attempt at converting existing assets and using them in the new sort of Hyperion world. So I learned a lot from that, because we're obviously doing more of that with Wreck-It Ralph 2. We're converting assets from the first Ralph to use in the second one, and same with Frozen 2 as well. So I think that project was an important step for us in terms of kind of moving things forward into the GI world. So I was only on that for a couple of months though, because I got pulled onto Zootopia not long after that, and I got pulled on there early because they needed to do more city building work. And I had just been doing some of that on Big Hero 6. So late 2014, right around the time Hero ended, there was a pretty big change in the story for Zootopia. It went from Nick Wilde, the fox, being the main character, to Judy Hopps, the bunny cop, sort of became the protagonist of the film and sort of turned the story on its head. So they had this whole new sequence where she goes on a train ride around the city of Zootopia. And all of a sudden, that was sort of this big marquee sequence in the film where they needed all this stuff built out, and they had, limited time and resources to do it. And so they said, what do we have that we've already done that we can leverage for this? And so that's how I got involved with Zootopia, is they kind of asked me to come over and work on the city building stuff.
That's cool, man. And actually, for you, do you find like, let's say, exploring some tools that are special, maybe gives you a chance to kind of niche out into a certain area? Like, do you think it's important, or do you think it's at least a good strategy for kind of making yourself stand out, to kind of latch on to something that you can make your baby and you can be the go-to person for that specific tool?
Yeah, I mean, it's got its advantages and disadvantages, right? Like on the one hand,
you get called city engine guy all day long.
Yeah, so that fortunately not so much anymore. I mean, I think there was some danger of that happening. My supervisors and my artist manager and the folks in my department were very cognizant of that, and they definitely did not want me to get pigeonholed as like the city engine guy. And on the one hand, it's useful, right? Because if they need that kind of work, like you're the person that they go to, and they say, hey, you are the expert, come and do this kind of work. But if they don't need that kind of work, and that's the only thing that you know how to do, guess what's going to happen to you? You're probably not going to be working on anything for them. So they tried to balance my work on Zootopia with the City Engine side of things, and plus I was also doing some work with Tech A&amp, kind of learning a new department and getting to dive a little bit deeper with a department I didn't know as well. But it was definitely, that was the main reason that I was pulled over for that film. And the challenges for Zootopia were very different from what we had on Big Hero 6, because with Hero, we're starting with real San Francisco city data. Like, we're starting from actual geography in a real place and building stuff out on top of that. And Zootopia is completely fictional. Like, we're starting with a map and that somebody's drawn. We're looking at visual development of different skyscrapers and how these things fit together. There's no real world data to go off of. So we had to figure out how to do this at a city scale pretty quickly, and do it with these sort of animal style buildings. And how are we going to put these things out there where people can use them in layout and get them into lighting? So it was interesting trying to tackle that challenge. And I was essentially sort of put in charge of figuring out how we were going to do that. Which after coming onto my second feature film ever in my career, just sort of
no pressure.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, they're like, this sequence is critical to the movie, and we need these buildings in here. And if this doesn't work, then we don't really know what we're going to do. So like, yeah, okay, this multi-million-dollar feature, this is, then they've basically said, okay, you're the guy in charge of figuring this out. That was wild. I mean, that was another big milestone in my career, was sort of being tasked with the responsibility of getting this thing done. And it still makes me kind of scratch my head and go like, wow, I can't believe they picked me to do this. But and it was a big honor, and it was a lot of fun to work on too. I mean, seeing the first time I saw that finished train ride sequence with all the buildings in there and all the music and sort of the final render and the color and lighting, it was just incredible. And I mean, I looked at that sequence, hundreds, if not thousands of times during the production of the movie, and just to see it all come together at the end was like, I'm pretty sure I cried. Like, it was pretty awesome to see it up there on screen.
That's awesome. Like, what were some of the big challenges for you at the time on that specific project and that specific area that you're tasked with?
Well, each of the different districts in Zootopia are meant to reflect a different animal climate. So I had to kind of come up with different rules for street patterns in each of these districts. And that was a kind of time-consuming and iterative process where I would sort of spray down some street patterns in one area, like in the Sahara Square, for example, that's supposed to have this kind of craggy, rocky look to it. And I would show that to the art directors, and they would look at it and they'd say, yes, that looks good, or, no, tweak this over here, make this denser over here, and, have them sort of fan out. And they would draw over things and sort of give me some notes to use. So I really, that movie was kind of where I learned more of what the life of an artist is, right? Like, you do your thing, the director looks at it and gives you notes, and you go and you adjust those notes and you show it to him again the next day. And it was kind of there were a couple of months where I was just grinding on that, like kind of making these street patterns and making these building distributions and, sort of playing with a Lego set in a sense. Like, I'm taking all these pieces and putting them together in a way that I'm getting these creative notes on. So as a TD, like, you don't always work on something that gets to end up on screen. You
Story
kind of
of my life.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, you say, oh yeah, I spent like 16 hours looking at this shot, trying to get it to render it with less memory. And your parents or your grandparents go, oh, okay, that sounds good.
Exactly.
But with this, it was, I could point at this train ride sequence and say, that I made that, I worked on that. And so the pressure of having to make it look good, because millions of people across the world are going to see this thing that you're putting together. That was a big challenge for me because I wasn't used to doing the kind of work that people ended up seeing. So having that level of pressure was definitely different.
Yeah, you don't want to let mom down.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You don't want to point it out and have them go, oh, well, that's nice. I think technically, in terms of building the city, it was, in some ways, it was easier than Big Hero 6 because we're working at a slightly different scale with the way we were assembling the buildings. Like on Hero, we have a lot of little tiles that we're putting together to make each of these buildings. And so we would end up with, many, many, many parts coming together, kind of repeated over floors, pretty complicated building rule sets. But on Zootopia, we're basically plopping whole buildings down on the lot because we have a lot of organic shapes, a lot of things that don't repeat very well in terms of like vertical stacking and stuff. So the challenge was, how do we get a good distribution that looks good but doesn't have too much repetition, right? Because we still have a limited number of parts. So we did, things like add some material variation that pulled from a color palette of things that looked good, sort of distribute those so that we end up with a lot of similar but differently colored buildings. And when you're going past on a train really fast during this sequence, you can hide a lot of stuff and get away with a few different things.
Could you do any kind of L-tree additions, like to augment some of the shapes to make them kind of organically different in terms of, additional roofing or whatever it is that kind of complements those different structures?
Oh yeah, definitely. In the main sort of plaza area where the train station is, and you can see it best in a couple of overhead shots that show the whole city at once. The art directors are asking for like these leaf-like patterns, so that perfectly goes into the L system thing, right? Where you have all these branches and you end up with these streets that end up sort of look like branches or leaves, and they wanted that mixed with these little sort of nuclei of buildings that with these little spokes that radiated outwards. So just playing with different, as much as I could with City Engine's street generation rules and the way they set up, just trying different things with the sort of systems that you're talking about to get a certain look was a lot of fun, and definitely wasn't required on Big Hero 6 because the street patterns were already laid out for us because we're basing them on the actual city streets of San Francisco.
That's right. That's cool. That's really awesome. And typically, like, what is the turnaround kind of from start to finish for a feature film at Disney? I'd imagine, obviously, when it's going through the creative phase, and that obviously goes through till the very end, but during the creative phase, it's one section, but when it actually rolls into 3D, into actual production, is it about 3 years, or like what do you guys typically expect?
Oh boy, I wish it was 3 years. That'd be amazing. No, it depends on the project, and it depends on sort of the changes that happen to the story during the course of production. Since I have been here, basically every film has had. Well, Moana didn't necessarily have any huge story blow-ups while we were working on it, but both Big Hero 6 and Zootopia had big changes to the story, like fairly late into production that required us to basically put our noses to the grindstone and make essentially the entire film in less than a year. And it made it's kind of difficult when you have to burn that hot for any amount of time. But I would say the typical like sort of goal length for shot production, is like 18 months to, wow. Yeah. So that's because when things are ready, like people can crank it out. People work fast here. I've been working with the layout department on Wreck-It Ralph 2, and like as soon as they get stuff out of the story department, they are just cranking out shots like crazy. So I think on the ideal schedule, we would like to take at least 12 months, maybe 16 or 18 months for shot production. But we're not always on the ideal schedule.
That's really impressive, though. I mean, I've got a lot of friends at Disney, but obviously a lot of friends at Pixar as well, and that's like such the opposite, where it is, obviously it goes through a very long design phase too, but production typically, yeah, it's a lot longer. And I mean, then there's stuff like, I remember having lunch one day with one of my friends and completely depressed because he was on Good Dinosaur. And, it was the day that they decided, hey, we're going to completely revamp the project from the ground up. And, I mean, some of those projects never even see the light of day. Others go through the additional design phases. But, yeah, I mean, it's usually like Happy Feet. A lot of the other projects, 3 years seems to be the standard. So it's pretty impressive that you guys are able to crank it out that fast. But as you said, I mean, I guess also having keeping the same team every time, I think, is another critical thing where you kind of learn, whose strengths are where and how to collaborate together to get the best success. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and when I say 18 months for shot production, I mean I'm talking about like full crew rolled on, kind of everybody working on it all at the same time. I mean, there's always people who are on earlier working on assets or that kind of thing. So I think 2 to 3 years in terms of like different people are working on the movie. Yeah, that's totally in line with what you're talking about. But in terms of like actually cranking out the shots and getting the whole thing done, I think, the shorter time period is what we have been working under.
That's great.
There's always, everybody would always like more time to work on things, right?
Oh yeah.
And the studio's done, actively taken some steps to figure out how we can get on a better schedule for our films, which is very much appreciated.
I think in a lot of ways, having less time can sometimes be a blessing because there's less guesswork and more like, you're more likely to jump to making the right decisions early on. And I've had that kind of fatigue or limbo where I'll be on a project and let's say that we're in pre-production and we got about 2 years on a feature film, and because of that, suddenly it's just like, let's try different things. And as soon as you get down to the crunch, decisions are being made all the time, and they're always good calls. And it's just because you've got the luxury of tinkering around and playing with the what ifs that what is like Pareto's law? It's like a task will take as long as
as long as you have, and you will fill up whatever disk space you have available. So
I like that. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I mean, I think it's pretty cool though. And like, what's the typical headcount for a team like that? Are you looking at 100 people or 200-300 people?
Yeah, well, people sort of roll on and off in phases depending on which departments are working on a film at a given time. I mean, it would be hard for me to say what the exact head count, like full staff on a feature film is. And people are always, even if they're not strictly assigned to a show, like working for that particular production at a given time, I mean, we're all in the same building. So people are always, working on this or that, especially as TDs. Like we may be cast to a certain show, but we are always helping anybody that needs help, even if they're working on a short or on, a different film that we're not cast to at the moment. So, but if I had, I mean, it's in the hundreds in terms of folks that are actively working on a film sort of at peak head count. But I'm not a production management person, so I don't know that I can give you an a totally accurate number for that.
Yeah, that's cool. And what about Moana? What was that experience like for you? And actually, by the way, did you guys get an Oscar for Zootopia?
Yes, we did. We got the Best Animated Feature Oscar for Zootopia,
Great.
which was also amazing. Thank you. It was coming off of Big Hero 6, which also won the Oscar. Like it was this amazing kind of run of like, okay, well, I think Frozen was obviously very, very successful. And so for Frozen and then Big Hero 6 and then Zootopia to win, that kind of cemented in our minds that like, Disney's back and we're making really great films, and everything I've gotten to work on, I'm extremely proud of, not only in terms of the visuals, but I think we're putting really good, positive stories out in the world. Mm-hmm. And despite, whatever money the movie makes or whatever, money I make working on the movie, that's all fine. But I think if I was not satisfied with kind of the sort of movies that we were making, I would be a lot less satisfied with my job for sure. And I know that you're not always going to love everything that you work on necessarily, but I've been very fortunate that I think that all the films I've been able to work on are really a positive influence on the world, which I'm super lucky because it hasn't always been that way at Disney or at anywhere else, really, to have films that are have had as good of an impact as I think these films had.
No, absolutely, definitely, and it's really cool. Like when you get to see your friends' kids all kind of playing and absorbing the whole kind of Disney movies and the Disney culture. And I mean, I guess for a lot of us, like growing up, we had that, and then there's been drier periods where the medium just changed, where traditional cell animation kind of went out and animated features came in. And even then, I feel like there was kind of in the 2000s a period where it was more, hey, this is a money-making machine, and a lot of the movies coming out from every studio on the planet weren't necessarily good ones. And it's just more kind of, hey, let's just knock this out because it is what it is. Like there's Ilian over in Spain they're doing great stuff. But again, it's like a cell phone company turned animation studio because it's a good investment. But when you actually have, you know, this monster in terms of being a massive studio that's been around forever and has been more focused on storytelling, and finally the tools and everything else have kind of caught up to a point where artists can kind of go back to the roots of focusing on making great stories that people connect with, rather than this is an entertaining popcorn movie, because that's my area. That's what I do, blowing crap up, and people walk out and forget it 5 minutes later. But to actually have something that yeah, you can relate to, and you get moved by, you know, you get scared by, you cry, or however you connect with it. Yeah, I think it's really great for sure.
Yeah, I mean, story is king. That's why it sometimes is a headache to make our movies, because it changes things, and it makes, you know, everybody has to work a little bit harder to make sure that that thing ends up on screen. But in the end, I think it's worth it.
That's cool. And on Moana, like that project, what were the typical tasks that you were responsible for, and what were some of the big challenges for that?
So as I mentioned, or as we sort of touched on a little bit earlier, I was my supervisors were very cognizant of me not getting pigeonholed as the city engine guy. So they were like, okay, let's throw you into something like completely different. Obviously, there's no city engine in Moana because there are no cities. Don't have to worry about that. But they kind of tried to branch me out a little bit. And so I got to work mostly with the lighting department on that movie, which meant, of course, dealing with lots and lots and lots of water. And we had, you know, a brand new water pipeline. We had never done water at that scale in CG before. And in fact, I think the last time we had done CG water at all, I guess there was there was like a big wave in Frozen and some stuff like that, but those were really sort of one-off shots. But so I think something like 70% of the movie, Moana, is on the water, or like right next to the water. So we had to have a way to do as much of that stuff automatically as possible. And so we had this sort of auto boat wake script that we wanted to be able to generate the wakes automatically as much as possible. That took a long time for it to actually work without any interference. But when it did, it sure saved us a lot of time, saved a lot of time on the effects artists too. But a lot of what I was dealing with was water rendering issues, water management, figuring out, like we had this whole caching pipeline set up where when lighting is rendering their stuff, they're essentially generating a level set for this water that our renderer Hyperion is using to actually, you know, do all the calculations and the surface calculations and all that kind of stuff. So I got to learn a lot more about the sort of technical underpinnings of like the caching system that we were using, and how what a level set even is, and kind of what mathematically these things represent.
How big? Sorry to cut you off, but like how big were some of those level sets? Because I imagine for anything to do with the water, it's going to get pretty intense pretty quick.
Oh man, well we had a whole.
It's essentially volumes.
Yes, it is, and we. So normally. We have our fastest kind of quickest access disks are in our like temp area where effects is generating a lot of stuff. And we actually had sort of a temp publish area where effects would write those things out because they were the largest volumes and required, you know, had the fastest access times.
So you want to keep off the network to stop bogging everyone else down.
Yeah, exactly. You know, things like that challenges you may not expect to come across. Like, yeah, optimizing basically for network access and disk speed times, like storing the data in a certain location can make a huge difference. We're talking terabytes for sure, like for some of these very large shots, which we had some large volume data chunks for Big Hero 6 as well. Like there's a wormhole sequence at the end of the movie where we have all these sort of 3D Mandelbrot patterns that are undulating.
Particle caching, I'm guessing, for that.
Oh, yes. And at that point, those were the largest kind of effects caches we had dealt with. And I think that those were dwarfed by what we were doing with the water from Moana. But I would have to go back and look to tell you exact sizes. But I mean, there was terabytes and terabytes of data that would basically be generated for a render. And then when the image was approved, we just had to go delete the cache data because we had to make more space for the next shot. So that was definitely a challenge, a data management challenge, as well as so the water in Moana, because it's so omnipresent, is like, imagine you have a ground plane, but it's moving and your characters are on it, and a bunch of different departments can affect where the ground plane is and how much it's moving.
That's right.
And all these departments are working at the same time to do their shots. We were extremely vertical on Moana because of the way that the schedule stacked out. So we had, lighting is trying to do some renders while animation is still doing some tweaks to the character performances. And they have controls on the water rig to actually be able to affect the height of the water and how it's interacting with the boat. So we had to come up with whole new ways of getting different departments to talk to each other about how they were working on sequences, because with so many different ways for the water to be changed in its appearance, we just had to try to get a handle on that as soon as we could, because otherwise, somebody on one end of the pipe would expect a certain thing, and then when it gets to the end, a bunch of different people have made tweaks to it and it doesn't look the way that it's supposed to anymore. So yeah, I mean, 100% the water took up a whole lot of my time working on that movie, for sure.
It looks great. I haven't seen the film, but I was flying to Europe earlier this year, and my fiance was watching it on her screen, and I kept looking over like, damn, that water looks really cool. So yeah, great job.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, so all in all, I mean, obviously right now you're in Wreck-It Ralph 2. When's that coming out?
It'll be, I don't remember the exact date, but I know it's November of 2018 in the United States.
So that's a little bit of time.
Yes, fortunately we do. It was originally supposed to come out in March, but then they pushed it to November, which, made everybody breathe a nice sigh of relief.
I bet. That's great. And I guess just to wrap things up with one or two more questions, I figure one thing that I'd love to get your insight on, but how do you think coding, I mean, obviously it's a big part of your job, but like, how do you think coding's really able to help yourself, but other artists as well? Like, do you think that's really beneficial that other artists, especially effects or lighting, rigging, have at least some basic understanding of how to script and how to write tools?
Well, I mean, I'm biased. I have a computer science degree, but I think that learning to code and going through that process really helps you learn how to solve problems. Not just technical problems, but just thinking about stuff in a series of steps, breaking things down into manageable chunks, which is sort of all of what coding is about, is sort of breaking things up into pieces that you can use in different ways, and how you can efficiently attack a particular challenge. I think that's just a useful way to think about things, and learning about coding and how to structure things in different ways. That's just a general, I think a generally good skill to have. Not even just thinking about the technical stuff, but just thinking about how to solve problems. But I know that there are a lot of artists at Disney, and I know at a lot of other places too, that have some coding ability and that will frequently write little utilities for themselves, or they'll write something and pass around to other artists sometimes, which as TDs makes us a little bit nervous, because who knows what code they're passing around and what it's doing. But it's good too when you have those skills, because we do our best to kind of interface between the tech side of things and the artists, and it makes bridging that gap easier if you have a technical understanding of code and sort of how those things generally work. If it's less of a mystery box to you, then it'll help you be less afraid of, this magical script that's doing XYZ to, your precious work that you've put a lot of love and care into. And I think the opposite is true for us too, as TDs. Like, the more we understand about the work that the artists are doing, the less that we can, be confused by some step that they're doing, or like, why did you do it this way? It's like, well, because they have a certain approach to their art, and it's just kind of it's true of them as it is true for us too.
That's great. That's really cool. And yeah, again, thanks for taking time out to chat about all this. It's been really insightful. And for anyone who wants to reach out to you or find out more about you or send you an email, I'm just kidding. But where would they go to find you online?
Well, I am less active on social media than I have been in the past, but the best bet is probably just go to my website, brandonjarratt.com. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I listened to your interview with Freddie Wong, and I love Freddie's work. I think the stuff he's doing is super cool. So that was fun to listen to what he had to say too.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Again, thank you, Brandon, for taking time out to chat. I had a blast and had a lot of fun just getting to chat and nerd out a little bit about his career as well as all the work that he's accomplished at Disney. So that being said, I've got a lot of really great episodes coming up over the next couple of weeks. I'm going to be interviewing the founder of Dabarty and also the VFX supervisor for Atomic Blonde. I'm interviewing the creature lead for Doom over at id Software, and lots of other really cool ones. At the same time, I put out a post on Facebook not long ago just asking people, like, who do you want to have interviewed on the podcast? Also, what are some of the themes or subjects that you might be interested in? Because again, I've got episodes lined up for quite a long time, but I'm really interested, especially being 2018, hitting the reset button a little bit. I'm interested to see what you're interested in. Like, what are some of the things or people that you would love to get a little bit more light shed on? So this is a chance if you want to reach out to me. Simply shoot me an email. All that stuff will be in the show notes, or you can just simply email amckay@alanmckay.com. And yeah, let me know who you would love to have on the podcast if you have any suggestions, or what are some of the subjects that you're interested in. What are some of the things that you're struggling with right now that you would like to have some light shed on? I've got a bunch of boot camps I'm trying to put together at the moment, as well as interviews with a lot of other people, but I'm always interested to get feedback. Even if there's things that you want to have less of, if you want me to talk less at the front of these, I'm always, looking to add insight to a lot of these episodes. But again, if that's something that you don't like, I'm always anxious to get feedback and know what you like, dislike, and everything else in between. So I will leave it there. Again, if you want to check out the free training, it's available for a few more days. Go to alanmckay.com/decay, DECAY. And like I said, if it's past January 12th, 2018, you can still go there to sign up. There's a lot of other free training I'm putting out on my Inner Circle list, which you'll be able to sign up to by going to that link. So that being said, I'll be back next week. Until then, rock on.